Good afternoon, everyone. John Donnelly, smiling from Your Holistic Academy, and a very special guest on the show today is JP Taggart from Core Impact. How are you doing today, JP?
I think really well, John. Thanks very much for having me on, and I'm excited to have a quick chat about what we're getting up to at the moment.
Great stuff, JP. I'm delighted to welcome you because Core Impact is the ethos of Core Impact is what I'm really interested in, and the values that you it's about developing people, JP, isn't it?
It is. It's actually funny. We were chatting there before we went live. That's actually what our website's called. It's called developingyourpeople.com. Even though the business is called Core Impact, and we decided to go with that because we wanted to explain it in a way that this is what we do. You know, Core Impact is all about people. Our vision is actually to be a global influence on personal and professional development in individuals, in businesses, and in communities throughout the world. So it's a big task, but we're well up for the mission.
Yeah, and I would straight away I would describe that as a holistic vision, JP. Yeah,
because definitely. And you know, John, during our journey, and keeping in mind we've only been in business a few years now full time, and we come from a management background, and we realized that passion really early on, and I've found personally, I mean, we just finished a coaching qualification that we've done, and we're about to become accredited members of the International Coach Federation. We have found that the holistic approach is where, from even a leadership perspective, when you're working with leaders who are in high stress situations, that holistic approach, you can get better results from that individual in a personal and a professional setting. So I can't vouch enough. And that's why I think what you guys are doing is so potentially huge, you know, for the world and those who take part, because the holistic approach can see results that other methods maybe won't.
Sure. Well, emotional intelligence now, JP, is a huge aspect of coaching, isn't it? I mean,
it is. It's huge.
Yeah. So that would be part of your offering in terms of the emotional, you know, and how you show up every day, how you feel every day.
100%, John. Yeah, actually, I was, as I mentioned before we hit live as well, we just finished up a program called Leading Teams Through a Pandemic, and actually emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman's model of emotional intelligence, is one that we focused on very heavily throughout the process, especially the first 2 weeks out of the 3, where self-regulation, self-awareness, you know, understanding yourself and your emotions and how you're feeling in a situation. But then once you know that, as you can regulate yourself as a leader and sort of have yourself under wraps, then you can actually use things like your empathy and social skills, you know, to understand the people around you and your teams, and build those relationships that inevitably creates fantastic cultures, because that's what we're all about, organizational culture and creating workplaces that people want to stay within and grow within, you know.
Sure. And JP, one of my favorite books that I've read lately was a book called Delivering Happiness, and was written by the founder of Zappos, which was an online shoe company, and they were sold for billions to Amazon. But the whole, it was all about the culture of, you know, how do you empower people? How do you empower your team to deliver the best service to your customers? And it was all about, you know, the ethos and the culture. And I thought that the book title Delivering Happiness was, wow, what a title for a book, you know, from an online shoe company.
Yeah, and funny, I've come across them quite a few times as an example that people use in terms of the culture, and I think a lot of companies can take that example. And you know, when organizations are extremely successful, some of the most successful businesses in the world focus on culture, you know, and in its simplistic form, it doesn't have to be a whole host of corporate social responsibility objectives, and this is what we do, and this is what we think we should do. And don't get me wrong, those things are good and they're important and it's nice to have, but in the day-to-day running of the business, and the more importantly, the relationships within the teams who run the business, it can be as simple as, we talked about emotional intelligence there quickly, you know, having people who understand themselves, who understand each other, and they actually feel part of something that is bigger than themselves. You know, we discuss vision a lot, and in holistic practices throughout my own journey, I've learned having a vision, you know, is so important. Understanding where you want to go and what you want to achieve, that's the very first step, you know. Strategy, for instance, you could use that as, this is your strategy, this is where you want to go. But we would also focus on like core values, because a lot of people would ask us, we know where we want to go, we just don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
And one of the very first things I would say is, well, do you have strong core values, ethics, morals, parameters that people can work within in order to achieve the vision? Many organizations may tell you, yes, we've got that up in our boardroom and it's nice and it's graphical, and but 9 times out of 10, when you're speaking to leaders, a lot of times those leaders don't even know the core values, never mind their employees.
Yeah.
And it's important to have them in place, because from my experience when I was leading teams as a manager full-time, and still do, thankfully, but when it was full-time management, I found that whenever you allowed people to have a little bit more responsibility with the parameters of those core values, you can get so much more out of them. They realize their potential easier,
Yeah, yeah. And JP, I mean, developing your people, that's your developingyourpeople.com. That's your website, yeah?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's all about that personal development journey, isn't it? And
it is.
Yeah. How did you get started on that, JP, that journey yourself?
For me, what actually happened was I actually worked, as I say, full-time management. I grew up through the organization. I was lucky enough to work with my colleague Sean. He's always on my back, you'll see there. And he was my manager, and we built up a fantastic relationship. We worked within the same management team. I grew up through that organization, and Sean and I shared a simple philosophy, that as long as people have the right intentions in everything they do, then no matter what the outcome is, as long as they had those good intentions for a good outcome, as a manager, as a leader, that's good enough for us. As long as we do our bit and we provide the vision and we provide the core values, and we let them know, managing expectations wise, what we expect from them. As long as they come in with the right intentions, you can mess up 5, 6, 7 times, but if you had the right intentions going into that and you were trying something new and you were being innovative in your role, then that was okay. And that quickly grew. I mean, it started off with me sort of pitching the idea to Sean late nights when we were finishing up work, and I was going, I haven't come across many people in our roles who are as passionate about leading people and developing people as we are, and we not create a business out of this. At the time, Sean had some very young children. He had just had his second child, I believe, and he has 3 now, and they're still quite young. But at that time, he was going, look, I'm just playing daddy at the moment. You give me a chance, and I'll catch up with you. And so those discussions went on for a few years. Slowly but surely, we started realizing, that we'd done our research. We went to many, many workshops. And then we realized, we have something that we believe could actually make a difference in the world. And that's what it really comes down to. The journey that we're on is one that we are continually developing ourselves while we develop others. And we will always try to service people in the best way we can. And one of the ways we do that is through holistic approaches. We've found that the holistic elements that we add to the workshops or the mentoring or coaching in a lot of cases that we do with leaders, the feedback always comes back to, I enjoyed the mindfulness element, or the pause, the simple pause that it allowed me out of my day. And that has now serviced me enough that I can jump back into the ring of fire that is my job and the targets I need to meet.
Yeah, and you mentioned mindfulness there, JP. It's I guess your state. How do you show up every day for work? Really, I mean, at the end of the day, your performance, your productivity in work is really, how do you show up every day? What's your energy? What's your passion? What's your commitment? And that's all to do with your own personal state, isn't it? Really, is how you show up every day.
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to the emotional intelligence element. For leaders. Like, for example, right now, this is a very challenging time for everyone in the world. The global pandemic has added unprecedented challenges from a mindset perspective, not just for leaders, but also employees and people across the board. And so anytime we're speaking to anyone, we try to acknowledge the fact that, especially leaders, because we work a lot with leaders, are people who are, I say leaders, but it can be informal leaders, it can be people of influence within the team, and that you could be a secretary and you could be an informal leader within that company. But in order to go on a journey, it's important to understand where you stand, and that's why emotional intelligence is important. When we're speaking to leaders, they're stressed out, they're anxious, they feel the uncertainty that we all feel, and a lot of times the leaders of any organization, people are looking to for answers, and they don't have them. A lot of times they don't have them. And that's overwhelming, you know, to especially if you're in an environment or an industry that it doesn't change much. There isn't much emergent change, and then to be thrown this pandemic, a curveball like that, to then everything that you knew and understood to be up in the air. I found in our approach, it's so important for people to look at the holistic elements of how they can achieve more. And you know, when we were doing it, we were looking at like the UK National Office for Statistics, and I think since 29 this time last year, 2020 to now, I think it's like 17.8 million working days have been lost through sick, completely and directly related to anxiety about COVID, sickness directly because of COVID, you know, stress, depression in a lot of cases, you know. And I find that a holistic approach can help people to take that pause, like I mentioned, and just, you know, when you're trying to recharge your batteries, you need something that, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And I use that all the time, but I like to flip that on its head. You know, if you find something that works for you, you know, whether that's a breathing exercise, and the Wim Hof method's really good, and we've looked into that, or if it's just simply just trying to get your mind calm and becoming a wee bit grounded in this in your situation there and then, you know, you can then recharge that battery and get back out there and do it. But it is also okay to understand that you do need that pause, because I think that we take the weight of the world on our shoulders as leaders, as employees, as people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay just to set it down, take a second, and just chill and recharge the batteries and get back in there, you know?
Yeah, brilliant, JP. So what sort of clients do you work with, JP? You work with teams mostly, is it? Or do you work with individuals as well, or what do you work?
So yeah, we identified very early on that our type of content resonated with people who are in leadership roles within the organization, or people who are wanting to be in leadership roles. And so what we find very often is it's a leader or a manager or an owner of an organization, all leaders, of course, but they come to us and they say, look, I would like to improve the employee engagement, and I would like to get more buy-in. One of the key kind of performance indicators that we would always focus on is employee turnover. So if you have an organization that would find that people are leaving quite a lot, sometimes it can be pegged down to industry, and of course that is an influence. It's a big influence a lot of times, but a lot of times we have found that we created a cultural model called Impact Success. It's our own personal model, which is our way of helping businesses and leaders to implement what we like to call a winning culture. So, you know, you're trying to create an organizational culture that people want to stay within, that they want to be, that they're attracted to and they want to work with. And it goes beyond the, you know, the incentives in terms of money or the fringe benefits that come with that job or the status that comes with that job. We're very much focusing on the intrinsic motivation, you know, the internal clock that people have that tells them in their life, this is what I want and this is what makes me feel good. And it can be really simple things. And actually, sometimes the simplest things are the best. You know, things like saying thank you, things like asking people what they're interested in. And what we find is we're working with those leaders to implement that change within the organization. And of course, we come from a management background, so we love working with teams, and we do. So when we get into to roll our sleeves up and you know, do the types of workshops that we do, like communication workshops, motivation workshops, or a lot of times we're practitioners in customer service excellence as well. But one-to-one coaching is where recently I've found is most effective for the leaders of the organization. And that's where I've been putting a lot of focus on in the last few months.
So the whole cultural shift, JP, do you feel that there's an acceleration there of that cultural shift since the lockdown started?
Yeah, John, I think, as I said, people don't like change. We're all habitual beings. We don't like to feel change. Although sometimes people can argue that and say it's not the change, it's the situation. You know, it's the way in which that you approach it. And I find that in this, so you took it from the change perspective, right? So you've got planned change, and you've got emergent change. This pandemic's emergent change. And what people find is, as long as it's in the right way and in a positive way, and it's communicated effectively, and you can see where you're going with the vision, people can really buy into that change. So
Yeah.
there has been a huge shift, yes, and there's been a huge shift in some organizations. The innovation has went through the roof, and
Yeah.
people have jumped on board and they've went with it. And there's been really great success stories, and I'm delighted to see that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the mirror of that is, that some organizations aren't driving innovation. They're trying to do the same things. And as a result, the culture is just really dropped. People are uncertain. They're taking more days off.
Yeah.
I find there's an opportunity here. And that's why we've been trying to focus on the leaders, because they're the ones, informal as well, and formal and informal leaders, to influence the other team members and the staff to get into that way of thinking and say, this is an opportunity for us as individuals and us as an organization.
Yeah, and it's like almost the change for a lot of obviously every industry is different, but for a lot of industries the change is really forced on people, because obviously the old way of doing business isn't going to work in certain industries anymore, because of people's expectations around what's happening out there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah. So JP, tell us a little bit more about your sort of partnership with Sean, and what sort of what sort of dynamics within your own team. How does that work?
So Sean and I, as I say, we had actually met through the management role that we're in. I wasn't in management. I grew up into it. Sean was always my manager when we were full-time work. But we shared that philosophy, as I say, that we both wanted to do good. We wanted to go beyond the roles that we were in, because we could see it worked with our team, our philosophy, and the way that we led them, and the culture that we had created. One of the key performance indicators was, we were managing a team of around 30 people. And largely it was at the age group of sort of in the round 18 to up to 30, right? 18 to 20, up to 30 in some cases. And we found that over a 2-year period, we had 0 employee turnover. Nobody left. And that culminated in us in the years prior to building upon the culture, being very deliberate about the engagements and the touch points, as we call them, of communication, of inspiring people. And we built a real bond, and like, we're like best mates, but at the same time, we understand the working relationship that we have. And Sean will tell you that he prefers to be the analytical person, and he wants me to be more upfront and doing things like this and coming on and chatting about the business. But he's really kind of come into his own in that as well. He's really developed himself in terms of putting himself out there. And I would say our dynamic is, Sean would like to go away and list things off and come back, whereas I'm very much in the moment, and I'll read the situation and I'll say, I think we should do this. And usually it works really well, because he'll come together with a step-by-step plan. I'll add my insert of inspiration, like I like to put it, into it. And then usually what we come up with is that intention piece. What are we intending to do, and have we achieved it based on this new operation that we're going to put in place? So we have a good relationship. We're very, very frank with each other. We will tell it like it is, as much as we have fun. If we feel like we're lagging, if Sean feels like I'm lagging something, or we have two-way open communication. And sometimes, because we're resilient characters, we're talking about emotional intelligence and all that, we can take it. If I need harsh feedback in something that I've done, or spur me on and say, JP, I think you can do better in that does work well for me. So and I think that we try to incorporate that into everything we do. Not saying you need to be harsh with your team, but build upon your emotional intelligence, get to know your team, and build real relationships. As a result of that, then you can get the best out of them. So if somebody needs to pick up the butt, and that's fine. And if somebody needs you to sit down and really take time with them to explain the situation and what your expectations are, do that as well. And I think we have a nice mix of that in Core Impact.
Brilliant, JP. And the other question I was going to ask you, just in terms of the age profile, because I know in your previous management role, you were working with mostly younger people, but probably now you're working with a much more senior people. So is there an age? Is the age thing? Is that a barrier, or is that a gap?
I wouldn't say it's a barrier. I would say that in the last number of months, we've found a lot more sort of late 20s up to mid 50s. That's what we have found in terms of the demographic of age. We find that we kind of take a two-prong approach in terms of the coaching element, in terms of the accountability element and mentoring. That can come in the form of somebody who's higher up in the management structure. Therefore, a lot of times, in most cases, you can find they're at least 30 upwards. But what we find is when you have inspiring sort of younger professionals, that's where we would be focusing on the soft skills element of the things that I'm talking about, understanding their emotional intelligence, understanding their influence within the team. And so we can find that you would normally find somebody in their early 20s up to about 30 in that transition period, needing a little bit more mentoring than coaching to get a bit more instruction on what the next steps would be. Whereas I find the coaching element would be with somebody who's sort of 30 upwards, where they're doing their thing, they know what they're doing. Sometimes they just have a bit of a blockade in their mind and they just need a little facilitation to get around it.
Sure. So who would your ideal client be, JP? Who would that be? Or have you identified it?
So right now, when we first started out, we would get asked that a lot, and we would say anyone, because people are people, okay? But we all know in business it's not as simple as that. You need to target somebody. I would say if you were to give me the idea, if you'd asked the ideal person, the ideal client, it would be somebody in a leadership role within an organization, and they're quite senior, and they want to drive change. They want to make a difference in the organization, usually linked to culture, and drive performance. And anyone in that role, anyone who is trying to drive change and understand that there may be some sort of blocks in place physically or mentally, they're the type of person that we're looking at. And we usually find that falls within, right now, the IT industry. We're finding a lot of soft skill requirements and a lot of building upon leadership skills. And that's where we're putting a little bit more focus in terms of directly reaching out. But I can honestly tell you that each of our clients come, right now as it stands, come from many different walks of life. And the trend would be they're leading teams and they need a little support in doing that throughout this pandemic.
Brilliant, yeah. And JP, just on the area of sort of mental health and well-being, because is that an area that you would focus on right now? Because it's a huge issue out there right now, yeah?
Yeah, hugely. We're very fortunate to work with and support a lot of mental health charities, especially here in the north of Ireland. And we've built really great relationships, and we've made a cognitive decision to start leaning more into the importance of mental health. So we're actually supposedly in the next few weeks, but we haven't a date yet. We're actually going to be going on a course that is to do with mental health awareness for coaches specifically. Within that coaching environment, how do you implement that? Now, separate to that, from a management background, we have a bit of experience in dealing with people who are going through situations like that, and through partnerships with charities and providing the right support for that person, that we have a fair bit of experience in dealing with that, and how that can impact the performance of your team, and how do you overcome that, and what do you need to do as a leader? Because a lot of times we get questions, like 101 questions from someone, like I've got an employee who is depressed, or worst case scenario, their mental health is really bad and they're suicidal, and that is the reality right now. And let's face it, that is a pandemic in itself. It has been before COVID came about, especially here in this part of the world. And it's important for leaders to feel equipped to deal with that. And now I wouldn't say we're definitely not mental health experts by any means, but we've really good relationships with experts who guide us in giving the right information. And so we're always keen in providing the communication and the connection with any clients that we're working with the correct people who can give the right advice.
Brilliant, JP. And let me ask another question then, just in terms of the reach of your programs. Obviously now with the online space, you can reach out to anywhere in the world. So are you doing a lot of work outside of the north of Ireland right now? Yeah.
Absolutely. You hear the word globalization. I don't think the world has ever felt smaller with the online platforms. We've been very, very fortunate to be sort of invited into conversations. We took part in a 3-stage process and 3 workshops to do with diversity and inclusion, and it was through a contact actually through coaching, and it was amazing, because I was on a call with one person who was sitting in Israel, one person was sitting in Germany, another was in America, we were here, there was mainland England people on, and it really brought the sense of, the world really does feel smaller. And what I would also say is, others are recognizing that, you know, and if you're not already recognizing that, regardless of what type of work you do, in terms of your bandwidth, in terms of networking, you have to realize that there are opportunities beyond this island. And this narrative, this platform, I mean, you could be sitting anywhere in the world. You could be really sitting in front of some lovely mountains there, John, and I wouldn't know the difference. You know, I remember I was on a call with a gentleman and in an English accent. So the assumption was he was sitting somewhere in England. Turns out he was actually sitting in Brazil.
Yeah.
And he had a lovely green screen like yourself there, and you would never known what was in the background. And that really gave me a sense that, you know, you can do business with anyone, and it really does come back to people are people.
Yeah, brilliant, JP. Yeah, listen, JP, that's great. So how can people get in touch with you? We put up the links anyway with the conversation here, but
sure.
You're mostly on LinkedIn, and you're probably on Facebook and all the social media as well, yeah?
Yeah, so the number one place you'll find me is on LinkedIn, and if you put the link in there, feel free to reach out. I'm always keen to build my network and genuinely just add value to people. But of course, you mentioned there our website, so developingyourpeople.com. You can book in online to ever have a conversation if you wanted to learn more about what we do. And then, of course, yes, we're on the social media platforms, but LinkedIn would be our key area there. And you can see a nice wee host of videos that we do on YouTube. If you search Core Impact, we have a podcast called Culture Talks, and we're up in our game with that. But there are some fantastic business leaders that we've spoken to with real great insights into their own experiences and through the pandemic. So definitely check that out as well.
Brilliant, JP. I've been following you on the YouTube as well, so I've been listening into some of your conversations. They're fantastic, yeah. And of course, obviously, we with the collaboration is the focus for us going forward, JP. So obviously, we're very keen to explore the collaborative opportunities for both of us here going forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to learning more about your Holistic Academy and how we can maybe facilitate you guys reaching your vision and just doing what we love to do, which is impact people's lives and drive their performance, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And JP, I'm delighted to welcome you today, and looking forward to you coming and talking more to our members and getting to know what we're doing. So fantastic, JP. Thank you so much. And as I said, we'll put up the links to how you get in touch with JP with the comments afterwards. Thanks very much, JP. Great conversation today. Thanks
a million, John. Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye-bye.